Hello YouTube, today we're replacing upper and lower control arms on this Cadillac CTS. Let's do it. So what I have done already was remove the two plastic guards on either side of the engine bay here and then removed the strut tower bar that was there. That was really only two bolts. We had a bolt here and a nut right there, and that pulled right off, got out of the way. I've already done the other side. That way I kind of had an idea what I was doing. And I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys the process here on the driver's side. We're doing upper and lower control arms on the front. Let's get it done. So as you can see, the first thing I'm doing is go ahead and removing the wheel using an impact wrench. Pop the wheel out of the way. Next, I'm undoing the bolts that hold the lower shock mount in place, pulling those out. That was a 13 millimeter. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take an 18 millimeter socket and loosen up that upper ball joint. Once it comes loose, you're going to have to use an Allen wrench to kind of hold it in place and use an open-end wrench to finish removing the nut. So next I'm moving to the upper strut tower mounting bolts. As you can see, I used my impact wrench to loosen everything and an open-end wrench to finish removing them. Once I did get them all removed, I realized I was going to put one nut back in there just to kind of hold everything so I could reach underneath, grab the strut tower mount, and then lower it down. Moving down to the garage floor, I'm going to go ahead and remove these two bolts and nuts holding the upper control arm in place. Then I'll go ahead and put my new upper control arm in place, reinstall the bolts, and torque them down. I'm going to discuss torque values at the end of the video because there's a little bit of conflicting information that I found online with regard to that, and I'm going to discuss all the torque values at the end. So stick around to the end of the video to hear about torque values. So now that we have that new upper control arm put on, we're ready to put everything back in the car. I just kind of put it in place, took one bolt, started threading it by hand to hold it up, and then used my impact wrench to kind of drive it home there. Back on the top side of the car, I'm going to go ahead and reinstall all of these bolts and get everything torqued down. I think these bolts are 83 foot-pounds. Reinstalling the ball joint here. It was a little bit tricky. I had to use another jack to kind of lift the lower control arm and get it into position. Make sure when you're doing that you're watching that brake dust shield. You don't want to bend that all up. Now again here, the information I was finding online for the ball joints wasn't really clear. So again, I'm going to discuss those torque values at the end of the video. Now to get to the bolts for the lower control arm, I kind of had to move this dust shield out of the way. It's just these plastic clips. You're just going to pop those off using an interior removal tool like I have here, or a flat bladed screwdriver, whichever you have. Get that thing out of the way and you'll be able to get down to the bolts. I think I've got a 21 millimeter here. That's going to work for the rear bolt. It's going to be 21 for the bolt and the nut. So make sure you have a socket and an open-ended wrench that you can use to get to that bolt back there. Before I went ahead and took everything apart, I did kind of mark where the bolts and nuts lined up before. You're still going to need an alignment when you're done with this, so don't think you're going to get away with not getting an alignment, but that will kind of help you get everything as close as possible until you can get it to an alignment shop, which I took it straight there. As you can see with this ball joint, I'm having a little bit of trouble, so I did use a bit of a propane torch. Otherwise, all I did was heat it up. I think the time lapse here was about a minute each time, so about 2 minutes total. Just giving it a little bit of heat, tapping it with a bit of a sledgehammer, and it did come loose. So not too terribly difficult. And there we go, that thing's loose. So now I'm moving on to the front bolt on the lower control arm there. That's going to be a 24 millimeter, so make sure you have an open-ended wrench and a socket for that. So this is the rear bolt on the lower control arm. That is going to be a 21 millimeter. Rewatching this video here, I probably should have used my air ratchet because it took me a few minutes to back this thing out of here. Kind of stupid when I have air tools available. All right, now we have it all unbolted. All we have to do is swing it out of position and lift it up out of the ball joint knuckle there. And here we are, putting the new lower control arm into position and then sliding the two bushing ends up into the slotted part on the frame there of the car. So I did use a bit of a dead blow hammer to kind of tap the bolts into position through the control arms and the frame. And I'm going to go ahead and just tighten the bolts a little bit here. Once again, my air ratchet probably would have been pretty handy, although I didn't use it. Now once I start to try to snug these up a little bit more, I want to make sure that they're close to the position that they were in when I remove the control arms. Once again, please don't think you're going to get away without an alignment, because even though I tried to put these control arms back where they came from originally, the alignment was still off pretty bad. So you will need to bring it almost directly to an alignment shop. I would not recommend driving the vehicle around without getting an alignment after doing this job. So as I'm snugging these bolts back down, I'm really not going to worry about the torque on the lower control arms, because in order to set the toe angle and all that stuff, they're going to have to loosen them back up at the shop, and the shop will have to torque them properly once they're done with the alignment. Once again, I'm using the jack here to kind of help get everything aligned. Please be sure not to bend your dust cover. I bent mine. I had to come back later and fix it because it was rubbing, so make sure you're paying attention to that. And again, just get these bolts nice and snug. I think the torque rating on that front bolt is like 200 plus pounds, foot-pounds, I should say. And the one in the back is a little lower, but it's still pretty high up there. But again, they're gonna have to loosen it to do the alignment anyways, so the shop is gonna have to do the final torque on those. So here I'm reinstalling the nut on my ball joint. Again, I'll discuss torque values at the end of the video, because a lot of what I found was not very straightforward and a little contradictory. Now here I realized I did not bolt the shock tower back onto the lower control arm, so I went ahead and got that all bolted back in. And here I've got my torque wrench doing the final torque on that lower ball joint. And I'm reinstalling this dust cover. Pretty straightforward process. If you worked with these clips before, you know what you're doing. And getting the wheel back on the car, make sure you torque your lug nuts appropriately. For this vehicle, and most vehicles honestly, it's about 100 foot-pounds. So make sure you whip your torque wrench out again here. I'm using this impact wrench at a very low setting just to get everything threaded on there. Okay, torque specifications. For the upper control arm to the bushing there is about 80 foot-pounds. The lower control arm, you see the two torque values there, but the ball joint I found conflicting information. This says 60 foot-pounds, but I also found 37 foot-pounds plus 130 degrees. So honestly, I think I torqued it to about 45 or 50 foot-pounds, and that ended up working just fine. I definitely didn't want to over-torque the bolts though. Everyone, if you enjoyed today's video, I would invite you to go ahead and hit the subscribe button down below right there on the right-hand corner. And if you felt that the products in today's video is something you might like to own yourself, there's a product link right up there to the right, upper right-hand corner, or down in the description will be a product link for you to purchase the product as well. Thank you very much for watching YouTube.